Welcome back to Slot Rods. In this episode, we're going to be dealing with the illumination of this McLaren. In the other video we started, I used the Slot.it chip, which allows 3 different connectors for lights, headlights, tail lights, and brake lights, and then the third can be used as an auxiliary brake light. It only activates during braking, so if you have some flashing chips, like for example, I have these fast flash orange chips that I could connect to that and then make those look like flashing exhaust lights when it brakes. You could use that, but that chip allows us to do that. It also comes with 3 connectors for those ports on the chip that I'll be wiring to the lights as I set them up. Speaking with them, they told me you should be able to get about 6, if you wanted to, max of about 6 LEDs per connector. So you could have 6 on the front, 6 on the back, and 6 is the auxiliary brake lights. That's a lot of lights. You probably never need that much, but they said it should be able to hold that. They wouldn't go any more than that, though. They said that would be like the max. So that's how that will play out with this chip. I'm probably going to have some static shots of me doing the soldering on a lot of these chips, since that's really hard to do behind the camera. But for headlights and such, I've been using these types of LEDs. These are warm white and regular white 6000K, but they're the 3528 SMD chips. They've found these to work really well for the headlights. I'm even trying some for this build. I'll even be trying some for the driving front lights, which I'll show in a little bit. But I'll first demonstrate how I soldered these up. Some I'm using from another company. For example, the tail lights, I'll be using these red ones from Evan Designs. Since this car has a clear tail light, I have to use the red LEDs, and they're just generally not as bright as the whites. They're just not even close. I've tried some other brands, just the cheapos off eBay, and I did not like them. A lot of them burned out real easy just because of the voltage. This already comes with the resistors in it. I don't have to worry about it, and they seem to be a little bit brighter than other ones I've used. So in this case, I'll probably put 2 in each tail light, just to make it really nice and bright. So the others, for the headlights and the driving lights, I'll be using these chips, which I will be having to solder and wire up myself. So we'll have a look at that.
This is the wire I'll be using. It's a 30 gauge solid copper with like a plastic coating over it. You really can't use strippers on it. It just won't, it's too fine. So basically you have to scrape the ends clean with your X-Acto knife, which it takes a little bit of time, but it works just fine. Here you can see I scraped it clean. You just need a little bit for securing it to the chip with solder. So you just clean off a little bit and then you're good to go. Here it is all soldered and ready to go. There's a little metal tab on each side of the chip with some good magnification. Makes it a lot easier to see. Just hold it in a little vise, add a little solder to the tab, put in the wire, and that's about all there is to it. Not that hard, really.
Now we can see I have those chips wired into my test circuit, and we can see how bright those headlights are going to be. It's pretty darn nice and bright. This one I had painted yellow for a fog light or a driving light, and in this car I'll probably be using some orange front lights, and that's where I used translucent paint on these to create that orange look. I mean, they have orange LEDs, but they just generally aren't that bright. So for some of these lighter colors, like the white for like the yellow or the orange, you can use a translucent paint and get that effect while getting more brightness out of the chip. So those are the chips I'll be using. Now I had to do a lot of modifications to the chassis. As you can see, there was basically a big black plastic cover over here, a small post that was part of the clear headlight that went into that black casing to hold it in place. And that is one reason why the Scalextric headlights look so bad, is because that single post and the way I have it designed does not transmit light very well at all. So the first thing I did was to grind that out. That caused the headlight, of course, to fall out, but I ground it down to give me a better transmission of light, and then I just super glued everything back into place. So it's where it was to begin with. As you can see, what was once a very dim headlight, now with a bright headlight underneath it. Let me just pop it in there. Of course, these have to be turned around just right. And of course that light's in the way. Let me bend these out of the way quickly. With that headlight stuck in here, we get much better headlight transmission. We get much better transmission out the front for the headlights. So that's how that'll be going. Then for the driving lights, I'm not sure how it's going to look. We're going to see. I'm going to put them there, see. But I was thought about putting them right in here. So let me turn the lights off so you get a better look at that. So I can paint around the edges of the chip in black to give it a circular look. And then I thought about putting them in the corners of this piece right here, so they would sit like that. So there'd be one on each side there. And that's how that would look. So I could also put them in the corners here. You know, you're just trying to make it look good and not look terrible. Sometimes you don't have a lot of options. But I like to, you know, light the cars up kind of nice. And adding the little driving lights and stuff is usually pretty cool. So they would sit in there. And then, of course, the reds are going to sit in the back. There is nothing in the way back here, so they will glue in just fine. I also thought about adding a couple up in here for extra brake lights, but that's not really what that area is meant to be for anyway, so I didn't want it to look stupid. So we'll probably just go with the 4 reds in each tail light section. And then I'll use some electric, it's like liquid electric tape that'll cover that up to keep the light from bleeding out. Once that's done and I get all these different wires in, I'll pack some, you know, because of ballast and weight, you know, you don't want all to one side. It's not a lot of weight, but we're not talking about very heavy objects either. So, like, I might work all the tail light wires up on this side, and then all the headlights will get in on this side, so it kind of balances weight distribution on the body. These wires and everything will be stuck to the body, but I'll have enough leads with the wire that you can take the body off, and then if you need more space, you can disconnect the wires. But they'll be attached to those plug wires I showed earlier, which, and don't know where they ended up right at this moment in time. Here they are. These will be trimmed, of course, but you know, all the tail lights will be connected to this wire. All the headlights and the driving lights will be connected to this plug. They'll be plugged in, and that's where we'll go with it. So can't really show trying to put those in, glue those in here, because I have to be able to get a closer look. But we'll go take some video after those get put in, so you can see how it looks at the various stages. But that will be the next part. Now that I have the lights and I'm ready to go with that, I can go ahead and start putting them into the chassis and getting it ready to roll. Now that I've got the headlights and some tail light chips wired up for power, I can do a test placement, see how they're going to look. Like I said, I'm going to use 2 for each tail light, simply because these are not as bright as the bigger chips, and I want it to look good. So just putting in 2 is going to give me a little bit better look. See, there's just 1 chip. It's not bad, but I can move 1 to the edge and then bring the second one up next to it, and you get a much better look on the tail light. So that's how that's going to go. So I just want to plug these in, have a look-see before I start securing things. So I have the front lights in place, glued in with hot glue, including the orange driving lights in the middle. Secured that. I've also painstakingly made a cover with the glue over top of the gaps in front of the headlight LEDs, so as the glue doesn't get down in front of them. But having that complete cap will allow me to use the liquid electrical tape to black that out, so we don't get light escape around the wheels and the chassis. Makes it just look cleaner. So, but I've got the wires down along the side. I'll eventually trim these. They'll get glued down in here and get trimmed and connected to the connector that will connect to the chip. But for now, I'll leave those alone, and then I will start on the rear lights. Now you can see I've done the rears. That was a little bit more difficult lining them up and getting them spaced just right and getting the glue to set. I've moved all the wires around to the side, and they'll stay secure to that side of the body, and the headlights will be on the other side. So the next step will be to get them glued up. Well, I'll probably connect them to the chip connectors first, make sure everything's working, all the lights are functioning now that they've been placed, and then the last step will be to get that, I'll show it to you here, this liquid electrical tape. It goes really nice on. The brush that it comes with is pretty thick, and it doesn't bode well for using it in tight spaces, so I use another smaller brush to do it with. But it flows on thick. It does prevent electrical shorts because it's just like electrical tape, but it's a liquid. It dries solid black, and that'll prevent any light bleed from around the LEDs going places I don't want them to go. So that will be the last step right there. So on to getting it wired for the chip.
The next step then is to connect the wires, and I have to start by twisting the negative and positive pairs together and then tin them. So we'll take a little bit of solder, heat up the twisted wires and just feed it on a little bit to tin that connector. Do that for both the positive and negative. Then I can take the chip connector wires and solder those together. What I did was put a little bit of heat shrink tube on each side before I did the soldering connection, and then once it's done I could slide that back over top of the wires and just leave that there while I do the testing. Once I make sure the lights work and everything, then I can go ahead and hit that with the heat gun and secure the heat shrink tube.
We are about the final stages here now. I've gone and secured all the wires in place, along with the Lexan cockpit. So everything's ready to connect up. I've secured down the chip with some hot glue. I even put the front tires on the tire chewer just to make sure theirs are super smooth, and I adjusted their ride height. So that's almost it. We're going to connect it up, secure the body, and then we'll put it on the track and have a look.
With the wires all soldered now, I can plug them into the chip, put the chassis onto the track and turn it on. Then I can test all the lights. As you can see, the headlights and the driving lights are looking just great, and as well the tail lights turned out just fine. Nice perfect placement, good light transmission. Checked it with the throttle to make sure the brake light function was working, and that's done. I can go ahead and heat shrink the heat shrink tubing on the connectors and basically she's done at that point. This is what it looks at the front of the car. As you can see, I've secured the wires in. I used some hot glue to secure the chips. I've got the ones in the center for the driving lights. Then once everything was in place and tested, I hit it with that electrical tape, the liquid electrical tape, to control the light bleed. And this is the final look at the rear. I've put all the liquid black electrical tape over the glue, cover all that light bleed. That basically finishes it. We're ready to hook it to the car, give it a nice test on the track, and then we will be ready to do the typical lapping.
There she is, my first complete scratch build. Quite proud of it. A little bit of running I've done seems to have been pretty good. Taillights came out pretty nice. So now that she's done, I'm going to get it into the race program, and then we will lap this car and see how she performs. Well, we're here with the moment of truth. Tires are done. The car's ready to roll. I've got it into Smart Race. It's cast to the big screen, and we're ready to lap the car and see what I've made. So let's have a go.
3, 2, 1.
We're going to stop her right there. I think she's done about as good as she can. A lot of top end, does not have the grip and cornering of the Porsches, but all in all a pretty nice car. Let's see how she's lapped. We're looking at a fast lap of 6.676. It's not fabulous, but it's not terrible either. We'll have to put that into the spreadsheet and see where it ranks with the other cars. For a home built, I'm pretty pleased with it. Like I said, it's not like the Porsches, but they're just in a class of their own. But maybe we can tweak this car a little bit more for the cornering. Most of these cars are going to get turned into, you know, magless or half magged, just for more fun and drivability. But my first scratch built, I'm really pleased with the results. So let's plug it in and see where she sits.
Here's the look at the spreadsheet. Coming in at 27 out of quite a few cars isn't too bad. It's not the greatest, but it's respectable, especially for my first time at building a car. There's more to tune on it, but I'm happy with the results, and we'll see what we can do in the future with it. Thanks for watching.